One of the most fun parts of comic books and superheroes for me, and I'm sure a lot of you nerds out there, would have to be the superhero costume. This is where artists can really try all kinds of things for all kinds of characters. And some of the things they tried really took us off guard. For example, you know, a lot of suits of armor do all these crazy cool things, like being actually alive, or adaptations, or traversing the vacuum of space, but not for our first suit of the day, the Muramasa Armor. Essentially, it had one main benefit, but despite that, it's probably the coolest armor I have ever seen. In the all-new Wolverine series, X-23 gets her hands on this special suit of armor called the Muramasa Armor. The word Muramasa may be familiar to you if you are a fan of Wolverine comics. The Muramasa blade was forged by the legendary swordsmith Muramasa by using a piece of Wolverine's own soul. It's the second blade made by Muramasa, and it's extremely durable and capable of cutting through substances on the molecular level, even adamantium. More than that though, the sword is also capable of greatly reducing the efficiency of a superhumanly fast healing rate, meaning that the sword is the only thing on Earth that can truly end the life of Wolverine or others like him. Well, this armor was made for Laura Kinney in order to protect from the broken Muramasa blade fragments that were being used against her. But other than its absolutely amazing look, the coolest thing about this armor is that it's made with soul fragments of Wolverine, Gabby, and Daken. This thing basically became a Wolverine family heirloom. Now, while the Muramasa armor is just absolutely awesome, this next suit is just straight up nonsensical, but that is why we love it. Tony Stark's virtual armor, or the Model 68, is probably the most unique of all of Iron Man's armors. The virtual suit first debuted in Iron Man 2020, Volume 2, Number 5, when Tony Stark had his consciousness pulled out of his body to save his life, and it resulted in the virtual armor, which was made from the resources of the, quote, 13th floor, which is basically a virtual reality built of solid light. Now, just to preface, I never said any of this had to make sense. The virtual armor, being virtual and made of solid light, could allow Tony to create any tool that he could possibly think of. It augmented his strength, it somehow actually protects against weapons fire, and it's invisible by default, acting as almost a force field around Tony that no one can see unless he wants it to be so. What's really cool is how it can separate from Tony to form like a prison bubble around people, and the suit even somehow still allows Tony to fly, and it protects him from the vacuum of space. I have no idea how it works. You have no idea how it works. It's the most comic booky thing I've ever heard of, but let's be honest, it's kind of awesome despite that. But if we were going to talk about one of Iron Man's crazy armors, why not talk about one of Batman's crazy armors? Enter the Hellbat suit in Batman and Robin number 33 by Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. The Hellbat is the Justice League's gift to Batman, which he dons to go to Apokolips, the homeworld of Darkseid, to try and recover Damian Wayne's body. Now, this suit elevates Batman to be able to trade punches with Darkseid himself. It was forged by Superman inside of the sun and was made out of a shifting nanokinetic metallic material that could activate via voice commands. It allows Batman to fly, run at super speed, while also boosting up his strength and durability to ridiculous levels. It comes with adaptive camouflage, a unibeam-style energy blast, and a shape-shifting cape that somehow literally turns into bats when it's ripped off, which is the most badass thing I have seen in a hot minute. Now, obviously, with all the benefits it grants Batman, it has to have some kind of downside, or there's no reason that Bruce wouldn't just wear it all the time. That downside is that the Hellbat suit slowly drains Bruce Wayne's life force and would actually wipe him out for good if he wore it for too long. Luckily, he only needed it to rescue his son, which he achieved in spectacular fashion. He then rebuilt the armor and kept it on the moon just in case. And of all people, Lois Lane was the only other person to use it to face the Eradicator. But going from one of the coolest suits in comic books to one of my absolute least favorites. When Black Condor first popped up on the scene in DC Comics, his choice of garb was interesting. Richard Grey Jr. gained the power of flight from being exposed to a radioactive meteor, though he believed he had just developed flight naturally after being raised by a flock of condors. I am not joking. So clearly, there is a level of, how do you say, creativity here. Richard came back into society from his time with the Condors. He then took someone else's identity while also being a costumed hero, and I think his superhero costume perfectly exemplifies how utterly off the rocker this guy actually is. Richard took to wearing a cape that draped out under each arm, being attached to his wrists bracelets, giving the semblance of wings because fly. It kind of reminds me of Monica Rambeau's earlier costumes, only worse. Now I'm sure that his underarm cape wing things could probably have had some kind of effect on his flying, but the rest of the getup is a mystery as to why he chose it. Essentially, he wears a neck collar that connects to this big chunky belt with one piece of fabric in the front, and he accompanies that with some short shorts and some really ornate looking boots. And that's it. Thankfully though, later iterations of the character took their look in some much cooler and serious direction. Now in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, Valkyrie is an incredibly capable warrior and is probably one of the strongest members of the Ultimates, but she wasn't always that way. Initially, Barbara Norris was just a 19-year-old girl with no actual powers who was obsessed with superheroes, specifically Thor. She did have some martial arts skills though, and she used that skill as a member of the Ultimate Universe Defenders, who were really just wannabes. They went off pretending to be superheroes for clout, essentially, until Loki gave them all real powers. She then joined the Ultimates, but all the while she was running around calling herself an Asgardian warrior, Valkyrie initially was pretty scantily clad for most of her appearances. I'm sure there are a group of fans who were all there for that, but for some of us, it just didn't make too much sense. It wasn't until later on, after working with the Ultimates for a little while longer and having some real training with real Asgardians, that she would begin to armor up to bring her more in keeping with someone who is engaging in incredibly intense armed combat on the daily. But for a good chunk of time, she was jumping into battle extremely unprepared. Maybe coming back from the afterlife taught her armor was useful, but on the plus side, I think the change in her armor over time actually kind of shows her character's growth from a young, kind of out of her depth hero into a powerful warrior. Now switching back to DC Comics here, the history of Catwoman's look is a long and honestly incredibly odd story. Over time, she would go through a number of looks until it eventually became a leather suit, which had a more practical master thief vibe, matched with a pair of cat eye goggles. And it became the character's most popular costume, with later redesigns all primarily retaining the key elements of that suit. But in the very beginning, Selina Kyle was just a woman in a green dress that was also a thief. That kind of checks out for the comics at the time, and it also felt kind of unique in my personal opinion, compared to all the zany villains that were around. She kept it rather low-key. All it took was one change to make that no longer the truth. Eventually, in 1940's Batman #3, Selina Kyle donned an orange costume with a cape with the super great addition of an absolutely terrifying full cat face mask. This was basically like a mascot's headpiece, but like a little bit smaller and tighter to her head, which I'm sure made it more practical, but for me, it's utter nightmare fuel. I don't know what it is about animal heads on human people bodies, but I am not here for it. Basically, she kept the dress that she started with, but now, get this, it was orange, with an incredibly high-standing collar, and it was combined with a huge reddish-orange cape. Tiny little blue heels were also there for added comfort, and she topped it all off with a terrifying full cat head piece. And I don't want to talk about it anymore. We're moving on. I promise I am not trying to make this a Bat family-centered video, but I think we can kind of all agree that the Bat family costumes go through so many different changes, from the terrifying early look of Catwoman to the terrifying in a different way look of Cassandra Cain's Batgirl. Cassandra Cain is the daughter of David Cain and Lady Shiva, two assassins who raised and trained Cassandra to become basically a perfect warrior. She became the new Batgirl in Batman No Man's Land, and her costume was such a drastic change compared to other Batgirls of the past. If I was walking the streets of Gotham and I saw someone dressed like this, I would just move, like to a different city, possibly a different country, maybe even a different continent. Going from the almost friendly seeming outfits of Barbara Gordon's Batgirl costume to this dark, brooding, leather-clad costume with basically no human facial features that walked right out of someone's nightmares, it's so fitting for her and her character. It's intimidating, it's intense, and if I was a Gotham City criminal who came face to face with this in the middle of the night, my life would flash before my eyes before Cassandra even laid her extremely capable fists on me. Now, when the X-Men were first created, their costumes were basically all just slight variations of the same basic look. Hank McCoy, when he first showed up, was a shorter, stocky guy with huge hands and feet. That was basically it. His original costume didn't even have gloves or boots, which helped him to stand out even more. Now, Hank was the bruiser on the team for sure, with his mutations being strength and agility. But while he may have been a somewhat odd-looking guy, he was still fairly human-looking. That is, until Amazing Adventures number 11 in 1972. Hank got a job at Roxxon, which is never going to go particularly well, what with them being incredibly shady. During his time with Roxxon, Hank developed a serum that acted as a catalyst for activating latent mutations for short periods of time. And then he drank it. The effects of this serum ended up making Hank grow gray fur, yes, gray, not blue. His muscles expanded even more, his ears became large and pointed, he got claws, and his canine teeth grew and became fangs. The serum further increased his superhuman agility, endurance, speed, and strength, as well as enhancing his senses, but it became the basis for how Hank McCoy would look going forward. It wasn't until Amazing Adventures 14 that he would become the blue, furry, awesome beast that we know and love thanks to Quasimodo. He's been the same ever since. Now in for our runner-up spot, in the future timeline where Batman Beyond takes place, before Terry McGinnis came along, Bruce Wayne was well aware that his body was beginning to fail him, which meant that he needed to build a suit capable of making up for his aging body. After pouring his vast resources and knowledge into his creation, the Batman Beyond suit was born. After spending years and years fighting crime in Gotham, this suit is only one of a few bat suits that are actually bulletproof, but it can do way more than just deflect projectiles. The Beyond suit has allowed Terry McGinnis to walk through burning buildings, survive underwater for extended periods of time, and the suit is even resistant to radiation. It features neuromuscular amplification, which has been able to help Terry bend metal bars, lift giant metal I-beams, move large quantities of rubble, and massive light projectors. Random, but trust me. It's not all physical, but it's not all physical. While Terry had previously been able to hear through thick walls and glass, upgraded version of his suit takes advantage of a system that allows him to literally see straight through walls. This suit literally has a polygraph device in order to tell when villains are lying. The Batman Beyond suit features almost too many things like cameras, voice communicators, retractable claws and wings, an incredible stealth mode, and it's even got lasers, man. But the best part of the whole thing is just being able to look at it. What an icon. Okay, for our last point today, he may have had a mullet at the time, but Superman in a black costume? Come on. After the Man of Steel was resurrected in Superman Volume 2, number 81, after his death at the hands of Doomsday, he came back with an all-black costume with silver accents. I don't know about you guys, and I know a lot of people hate that mullet, but you put any hero in a sleek black version of their normal suit compared to their usual color schemes, and I am there for it. Spider-Man did it, and it was one of his most iconic looks. Superman did it, and lordy lord, he killed it. The costume even got a modern revamp in Zack Snyder's Justice League when Henry Cavill's Superman comes back to life from a very similar Doomsday defeat, and it looked even better that time. Sure, black-suited Superman may not have lasted too long, and sure, the red and blue is just way more iconic and symbolic of the character. This costume has a definitive place in my list of absolutely favorite superhero looks alongside black-suited Spider-Man. Sorry we didn't talk about it. And that's all I got. Think I missed something? Well, let me know down in the comments below. I'm Adam Andrews, you're watching Top 10 Nerd. I will catch you all on the flippy flop, but until then, stay safe and peace out, you nerds. Whoop, whoop.